All right, so everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the Headline Books Zoom into Books program. Today we are speaking with children's book author Eileen Cooley, author of My Feet Say Yes When My Head Says No. So without further ado, go ahead and take it away, Eileen.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for coming and joining me for this presentation. I wrote this book along with Jill Dubin, who I believe is here today, and she's a very well-known children's illustrator. And I want to point out that she and I wrote the book together, and if you look at the book, all the illustrations are made of cut paper. It's quite a phenomenal approach. She uses paper collage to bring the characters to life. So I want to give a special appreciation to her, also to Wayne South Smith, who was our editor, and of course to Kathy Teets, who published the book through Headline Books. The purpose of this book is to teach problem-solving skills to young children, probably preschool age children, age 4 to 8. But before I actually read the book, I want to tell you how the idea came about. Jill and I are close friends, and I was over at her house visiting one day, and Jill's an artist, so she's always drawing, and she was sharing a drawing that she had made of her daughter. So her daughter, Nina, and she had an open spiral-bound notebook, and she had Nina's head on one side of the page, and she had Nina's feet on the other side of the page with, of course, her torso in between. And I looked at that, and it hit me, and I said to Jill, this is a great idea for a children's book. And from that, we went and developed the idea, and she made the illustrations. We brainstormed common dilemmas that young children might have and highlighted 2 common dilemmas. One, when children want to do something that they're afraid to do, and 2, when children want to do something that they're not supposed to do. So what we did was, the layout of the book is what makes it unique. For each of the 7 scenarios, one side of the page represents one thought or feeling that the child has, and the other side of the page represents the other thought or feeling, usually an opposing one, so the child has a dilemma. And we'll be talking about 4 different solutions that children can use, and it spells the word swap. So S stands for build a step, W stands for wait, A stands for find an alternative, and P stands for see the positive. So we'll be talking more about these later, but I'm going to read the book and highlight what's going on and how you might use it if you're reading it to a child, or even better yet, to a group of children. So here's the cover, and we're going to go through each of the 7 scenarios. Hopefully you can all see it. Can you all see it okay? No? Okay, so this is what the book is like, and this is what's unique about it. So you can see there's the same girl on 2 sides of the spread. On the left side, this girl says, my feet say I want to jump off the diving board. And you can see she's picturing herself with a huge smile on her face, jumping off the diving board. But this little girl has a dilemma. So as your eyes move over to the other side of the page, you see the problem. She says, but my head says, oh no, the board is so high. And you can see her sitting there with her fingers in her mouth, terrified of going off the diving board. So if you were using this book with a child or with a group of children, you would now say, what should she do? What do you think she'll do? What could she do? And you might have a whole discussion brainstorming different ideas. You know, maybe she'll take up soccer instead. Or maybe she'll tell her parents she hates pool water. Maybe she'll jump off the diving board anyway. What are all the different solutions children might have? And then whenever you're finished with this discussion, which could be extended to other fears, you know, maybe you're afraid of the dog down the street, or you're afraid to ride your bicycle, or any of a number of things that you might be afraid of. So you see the dilemma. She wants to do something, but she's afraid over here to do it. So then we turn the page to see how she approaches this problem. Here's what she does. She says, I know I will jump off the side of the pool first. And there she goes, happy as a lark. So she has done the strategy called build a step. She's taken a task that's difficult and taken an easier step so that eventually, over time, she can have success at going off the diving board. So let's look at the next situation. This one is more of an interpersonal focus, and here are two girls that are engaged in an argument. And the girl in the green, the one over here, says, my hands say, I'm so mad I could hit her. So they're in the midst of an argument, she's fighting. But this girl has a dilemma too. So you come over here and see, but my head says I'm not supposed to hit other people. So she has a conflict of a different kind. She'd like to hit this girl because she's really mad at her, but she's not supposed to. So again, you can have a discussion with the children. What would they do? How might they do it? Well, they could ignore this girl. They could give her the cold shoulder. They could actually throw something at her or hit her. What are all the options, how they might handle this kind of situation? And then after you've heard a bunch of ideas, you turn the page and say, let's see what she does. And here she goes. She says, I know, I will tell her how mad I am. And you can see this strategy is successful because on the next page, they're smiling and they're friends again. And this is a really common thing that parents and educators are often telling their children to use their words rather than hitting or throwing something at somebody. So let's look at the next one. This is a little boy, and he says, my body says, I want to stay in bed and sleep. He's looking kind of happy and cozy in his bed. But then he looks at the alarm clock, probably the alarm clock is going off, and he says, but my head says, oh no, it's time to get up. And you might know there are a lot of children who bounce out of bed in the morning, but then there are some who resist and prefer to kind of stay cozy in their bed and don't really want to get up. So he has a dilemma too. He wants to stay in bed, but he feels like he has to get up. So what do you think? How can he handle this situation more effectively? And again, you would have a discussion with the children in your life and then turn the page. And he says, I know if I get up, I can play with my dog. So he can now see the advantages of getting up. So this is what we would call see the positive. Let's look at, and you can see the cut paper illustrations really well in this picture. You can see all the texture of the dog. Each ear is cut out, the boy's shoulder, the sneakers. It's really a phenomenal art job. Okay, so let's look at the next page. This is a little girl looking at a piece of candy, and she says, my tummy says, I want to eat this candy. But she has a dilemma too. Move over to the other side of the page, and she says, but my head says, mommy says, don't eat before dinner. This is a common dilemma when kids want to do something and they know their parents don't quite approve and don't really want them to do it. So she's kind of stuck. And again, you would have a discussion. What should she do? I mean, she could, eat the candy. She could complain to her mother. There are probably a lot of different solutions. And you turn the page to see what this girl does. And she says, I know, I will save the candy for dessert. And you can see over here, she's eating supper, and here's that same candy sitting in front of her. So this is a strategy to help children learn to wait. So it's W for wait. So she can still see the candy isn't going anywhere. She can still get it, but she's going to wait till after supper. Okay, here's the next scenario. This is a boy who just got a new bicycle. So he says, my feet say, I want to ride the new bicycle. And he's picturing himself zooming along, super excited to have a two-wheeler, but then move over to the other side of the page and you can see his dilemma. But my head says, I might fall. So this scenario is a little like the very first one we looked at, where a child wants to do something, but is afraid or hesitant. And so again, you could do some of the same brainstorming about things that children are afraid of and how they can tackle it. And this solution is a little different. Let's see what this boy does. He says, I know I will get my older sister to hold on to the bike. So this is a type of building a step. He's going to get some assistance along the way to help him. And when he develops his confidence, he will be able to ride the bike by himself. So teaching kids to take steps and to break their problem into pieces. Now here's another interpersonal one that might be common, especially for kids who have problems with friends or perhaps even being bullied at school. So this boy says, my feet say, I want to play with Sam and his truck. So he's seeing Sam playing with the truck, kind of looking at him and thinking how he really wants to join in. But then he has this other thought. But my head says, I'm afraid he'll say no. So this might be a child who's heard no a lot and is feeling kind of hesitant to approach this child in his class. So what can he do? How can he handle this dilemma? Let's see what he does. He says, I know, I will ask Sam. If he says no, I will play with Emma. So he has a plan in his head. He has a plan B. He may not get his first choice, so this is a find an alternative. Sometimes in life we don't get our first choice and we might have to find something that's fun to do, but maybe not our ideal opportunity. The last scenario is a little girl playing very intensely with her video game. And she says, my eyes say, this video game is so exciting. And nowadays this is particularly relevant because everyone's sitting around with a phone or an iPad or a game in their hand. But she says, but my head says, it's bath time and I have to stop. So clearly she can't take this video game into the bathtub or she's likely to ruin it by getting it wet. So she has a dilemma too. She wants to keep playing it, but she has to take a bath. What is she going to do? Let's see what she does. And she says, I know I can play with my toys in the bath. So here she is, happily having a good time. And again, this is when you stop doing something you enjoy, but you can see the positive in terms of something else that you really can enjoy. So those are the 4 strategies in this book, and I'm going to just kind of briefly mention them again. So they're SWAP, so swap. So in a way you can think of swapping your dilemma for something else that you can do. So the S stands for build a step. And again, we want to take something that people fear and break it into smaller pieces so that it's more manageable. And typically you break something into pieces and then you make a hierarchy with the easiest item all the way up to what would make it more difficult. And then we encourage children to do the easiest piece first and then build up over time until they succeed. We don't want them to be avoiding things they're afraid of. Think of it if you had a child, I have a friend whose daughter was afraid of dogs, and it was a real problem because other people would invite this child over and she could never go because half the people she knew had dogs. So you don't go out and buy her a Doberman. What you do is first they took her to the pet store and she looked at dogs through the window, and that was her easiest first step. That was her build a step. And then over time she got more and more comfortable with dogs and eventually got her own dog. So that was a success. That's S, build a step. This is also a strategy that's used a lot with adults who have fears or phobias, or even an overwhelming work task. Anytime we can break something into pieces and do it piecemeal, it can help us succeed. The next strategy is W, learn to wait. And we try to teach children to wait. A lot of children are impulsive and excited and they want to have a now or never approach. Okay, and what we want to do is teach them to talk to themselves, to say to themselves, I can wait, I can have this later, and learn to do that. There's a very famous psychology marshmallow study that many of you may have heard of, where they offered children 1 marshmallow now or 2 or 3 marshmallows if they wait 5 minutes. And the researchers have found that the children who are able to wait and able to delay actually have better adjustment and tend to do better in school and later on in life. The third strategy, find an alternative. This is kind of like your option B. When your first choice is not available or you can't have it, how to manage your frustration and your disappointment by finding another approach, another way to get what you want. And this would be when parents are talking to children, instead of saying no, to try to say, hey, try this instead. So trying to redirect and help children find alternatives, managing both their frustration and their disappointment. The last one is P, see the positive. When you have to stop doing something that you really enjoy, it doesn't mean you can't have other sources of enjoyment. So those are different strategies. You could also think of more. I thought afterwards of writing the book that we could have an H strategy for getting help. And certainly in dangerous situations, we could have a strategy of tell an adult. So in terms of using this book can be used individually. You certainly could have a discussion with your individual child, but you also can really effectively do this in groups. You could do it with neighborhood children 6 feet away now. You can do it with classrooms, with library groups, nieces and nephews. So there are a lot of ways to use this book. But it's best to have kind of a discussion, because I think you can sort of learn how children are thinking and feeling and learn how they're looking at their alternatives. But another activity that you can do along with this, just take a piece of paper, fold it in half, and have the children in your life draw their dilemmas. So, they want to do something. What are they afraid of? They want to do something. What are they not supposed to do? So you teach them to build a step. You can try to teach them to wait. You try to teach them to find an alternative. And sometimes you try to teach them just to see the positive. So the overall goal of this book is to increase self-awareness and problem solving in young children. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to have a discussion or answer them. And I hope you enjoyed listening to it, and thank you for coming. So I'm waiting to see if anybody has a question.
Thank you, Eileen. If anybody has a question, would you please type it in the chat room there. If you scroll, put your cursor at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a chat icon.
Oh, I think mine's on private. Let me switch it. Wait a minute.
Yeah, just switch that over to everyone and you'll see.
Okay.
We have a thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
And thank you all for listening. I think it's really an important concept to teach all of us about our mixed emotions and our mixed feelings. And I've been lately thinking about how life is really an and, not an or, that we might feel more than two things. Somebody asked, can you purchase the book? Yes, it can be purchased through Headline Books. If you want it autographed, we'd be happy to arrange that. And right now there's free shipping. So if you'd like to buy it, that would be great.
Yes, we actually posted the link that you can copy and paste there from the chat bar, and that'll take you right to the book online.
Somebody asked, is there a parent or teacher guide that explains what I just described? The back of the book has a page, and thank you for asking that. I don't know if you can see it, that explains the strategies and how each scenario is tapping into a different strategy. So it says about the word swap and which scenario is trying to tap into each solution. But again, this is just a sample of the types of difficulties children might experience. You could expand it to include difficulties that your particular child has and make it very personal. Someone asked, do you recommend that parents pause between problem and solution, or should they go straight to the solution page? I really think it depends on the child. I mean, and maybe their age. Like I've heard of some 3-year-olds where people just simply read it. But I think as you get older, you really want to hear some ideas. If the child can't think some, you could say some like, oh, like in that interpersonal one, the girl could walk away. Well, what do you think would happen if she walks away? And you can have quite a long discussion about the whole thing. Someone asked, could this approach be specifically applied to the unique challenges in our current situation. Yeah, actually, there was a report done of how to help people with COVID-19 right now. And a lot of it was to acknowledge your thoughts and feelings and think about what you can control. And so I think in the same way, children, like, maybe they can't play with some of their friends. So what options are available to them? Kind of what can we do? What are our alternatives if we can't get our number one choices? Someone asked, what ages do you think would benefit most? It was written for ages 4 to 8. I've had some people tell me their 2-year-olds liked it, and I've also heard that some 10-year-olds liked it. I think you can adapt it by reading this and then saying, you're a little older. What might your dilemmas be? What might be your fears or things that you do or think you should do? Children have dilemmas, even middle school children. I saw my friend cheat. Should I tell the teacher? All the dilemmas that we have and all the ways that we feel conflicted in our lives. Let me see. Oh, someone wrote that as a psychologist, she could hear elements of cognitive behavior therapy in this. And yes, I think a lot of the strategies of thinking of alternatives, learning to do things in step instead of taking things on all at once can really be helpful. We want children to learn to manage their disappointments and their frustrations. And perhaps if they learn that at a young age, they'd be better able to handle frustrations and aggravations as adults. Let's see. I'm trying to think if I got all the questions.
I think so. Lots of awesome comments, guys. Thanks so much for that.
Yeah, and thank you all for your attention and for being here today and supporting me and the book, and Jill Dubin, and of course Kathy Teets for publishing the book. And I hope everyone stays safe and healthy in the midst of this virus.
Absolutely. Well, if there are no more questions, we will go ahead and wrap up. If you all think of a question later on, like once you have the book, if you have a question or something, all of the contact information is available on the Headline Books website as well. So feel free to email in some questions. Otherwise, we do have the replay available. It will be posted on Zoom into Books on YouTube. It's its own YouTube channel. So we're going to be posting all of the Headline Books, Zoom into Books presentations on that platform as well. So be sure to check that out over the next few weeks here. So again, thank you so much, Eileen. That was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Kathy. And thank you all for coming and supporting the presentation. I appreciate it.